Jack woke to the sound of soft humming, an unfamiliar melody that seemed to shift between notes impossible for a human voice to reach. He sat up quickly, remembering where he was. Station Epsilon, abandoned for 3 decades. Except for one non-human inhabitant, Linda sat cross-legged on the floor near his makeshift bed, her silver-blue hair floating slightly as if underwater despite the normal gravity. Her eyes were closed, the luminescent markings on her skin pulsing in rhythm with her song. She stopped when she noticed he was awake. "I apologize," she said. "I did not mean to disturb your rest. This is how my people greet the new cycle." "No, it's fine." Jack rubbed his eyes. "It was actually beautiful." "What does it mean?" Linda tilted her head, considering. "It is difficult to translate. The closest would be a greeting to possibilities. Each day brings new paths." Jack nodded and began packing up his gear. They had 2 more days before his contract deadline. He had already salvaged enough technology to satisfy the Federation, but there was still much more to collect, especially with Linda's help. She seemed to know every secret the station held. As they moved through the station that day, Linda guided him to laboratories that didn't appear on any official schematics, research spaces where the most classified experiments had taken place. The technology there was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Devices that manipulated gravity, experimental communications arrays that claimed to achieve instantaneous transmission across vast distances, energy cells with power capacities that shouldn't be possible with current human science. "Where did all this come from?" Jack asked, as he carefully removed a small device Linda had called a quantum entanglement module. Federation science wasn't this advanced 30 years ago. Some was reverse-engineered from technology my people provided. Linda explained, "Some was developed here after studying me." She hesitated, her markings dimming slightly. "They took samples while I was unconscious when I first arrived, before Karen intervened." Jack looked up sharply. "They experimented on you without consent." Linda nodded, her expression unreadable by human standards, but the dimming patterns on her skin spoke of old pain. "It is why Karen helped me escape. She believed it was wrong. The others saw only opportunity." Jack felt a surge of anger on her behalf. No wonder she'd been hiding all these years. They worked methodically through the hidden labs, Jack asking questions about each piece of technology before storing it in specialized containers. Linda explained everything with patience, though she occasionally refused to elaborate on certain devices, saying only that humans were not ready for such knowledge. During a break, Jack found himself asking more personal questions. Why did your people choose to contact humans? Why not just observe from a distance? Linda was quiet for a moment, her silver eyes distant. "We observed for centuries," she finally said. "Your species fascinated us. You create beauty in the midst of violence. You dream of stars while fighting over land you love deeply yet hurt carelessly." She smiled faintly. "You contain contradictions that my people lost long ago. And that was enough to risk contact." "Not just that," Linda corrected. "We also saw potential threat. Your technology advances rapidly in unpredictable ways. If left unchecked, you might eventually become dangerous to yourselves and others." Guided contact seemed wiser than waiting. Jack considered this. It was strange to think of humanity as both fascinating and potentially threatening, from an advanced species perspective. But it made a certain sense. Humans did have a knack for turning any technology toward both creation and destruction. What went wrong then? Why didn't the contact succeed? Linda sighed, a very human gesture she'd clearly learned during her time among humans. The Federation committee overseeing first contact became divided. Some, like Karen, saw opportunity for peaceful exchange. Others saw military advantage. She looked directly at Jack, her gaze intense. "You must understand, humans were not ready for the knowledge that you are not alone in the universe. Some reacted with fear, some with greed." By the end of the second day, Jack had filled his cargo hold with technology worth more than he'd earned in the past 5 years. But his thoughts kept returning to Linda and the decision that loomed before him. That night, they sat in the station's observation dome, a massive, transparent hemisphere that offered an unobstructed view of the stars. The dome should have been shattered or at least heavily damaged after 30 years, but it remained perfectly intact. "I maintain it Linda explained, following his questioning gaze. It brings me comfort to see the stars. The view was breathtaking. The station orbited at the edge of the Orion cluster, where stellar nurseries painted the darkness with swirls of purple and blue. Newborn stars flickered like diamonds against black velvet. Jack had been traveling space for most of his adult life, but he rarely took time to simply appreciate the beauty around him. Linda sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Tell me about your world. Jack Morgan, she said, softly. Jack laughed. There isn't much to tell. I grew up on a mining colony out past Saturn, joined the Federation Navy when I was 18, served 8 years before getting discharged. He didn't mention the dishonorable part of that discharge. Been salvaging ever since. Linda studied him. No family, no home, just my ship. Jack shrugged. And enough debt to keep me working until I'm old and gray. You are alone, Linda observed. Like me, Jack had never thought of his life that way. He had contacts, fellow salvagers, drinking buddies on various stations. But friends, people he truly connected with. Those were rare. His lifestyle didn't allow for much permanence, I suppose so, he admitted. But it's different. You were stranded here. I choose my path. Linda turned her gaze back to the stars. I wonder, she murmured, is a path truly chosen when circumstances leave few options? Jack had no answer for that. Instead, he asked, do you miss your home? Every moment, Linda replied without hesitation. My world orbits a binary star system. The days are painted in double shadows and twilight lasts for hours. Our cities rise from the ground like crystal formations, growing rather than being built. She smiled at some private memory. The air smells of flowers that bloom only in darkness. Sounds beautiful, it is. But it is also very ordered, very predictable. My people value harmony above all else. It is why I volunteered for the diplomatic mission. I wanted to experience something different, something unpredictable. She looked at him, those silvery eyes somehow conveying amusement. Like humans, as they watched a meteor shower begin outside, trails of light streaking across the darkness. Linda gasped with delight, the markings on her skin pulsing brightly with excitement. Jack found himself watching her more than the celestial display. Her joy seemed so genuine, so uncomplicated despite everything she'd endured. The next morning, their final day on the station, Jack made his decision. Have you ever piloted a ship? He asked as they finished cataloging the last of the salvage. Linda shook her head. I understand the principles but have never had opportunity. Jack nodded. Well, you'll get your chance soon. I need a co-pilot. Linda tilted her head in confusion, but I assumed you would. Jack, cut her off. I'm not turning you into the Federation or anyone else. Linda stared at him, her markings pulsing rapidly with what Jack had learned to recognize as surprise. Why would you help me? You could claim a substantial reward. Jack ran a hand through his hair, struggling to articulate feelings he didn't fully understand himself. I've spent 15 years taking whatever wasn't nailed down, not asking questions about where things came from or where they were going, just collecting my pay. His voice grew firmer. But there's a difference between salvaging abandoned tech and handing over a sentient being to be cut open and studied. But where would I go? Linda asked. Where would be safe? Jack grinned. I've got some ideas. There's places at the edge of Federation space where people don't ask too many questions. But first, he pulled out a small hollow projector. This is my cousin Amy Carter. She lived on the lunar colonies until she died in a mining accident 2 years ago. Her identity is still in the system, though. He looked at Linda with raised eyebrows. With some minor system updates and the right clothes, you could pass for human enough to avoid immediate detection. Linda stepped closer, examining the hologram of a woman with pale skin and light hair similar enough to her own unusual coloring that with some adjustments she might indeed pass for her. The lunar colonies were known for genetic modifications, so some physical oddities would be overlooked. You would do this for me? She asked her, voice barely a whisper. Why? Jack shrugged. The universe is full of people looking to exploit others. I've been one of them. Most of my life, he admitted. Maybe it's time to be something different. Before they departed, Jack made one final sweep of the station, downloading all the logs and records he could find, documentation of what had happened 30 years ago. Insurance, he told Linda, but also justice for Karen, whoever she had been, as they prepared to leave. Linda took one last look around the station, that had been both her prison and sanctuary for 3 decades. Her silver eyes lingered on the stars visible through the observation dome. "Do you think I will see my home again?" she asked softly. Jack didn't answer immediately. He knew the vastness of space, the impossibility of crossing between galaxies with current technology. But he also knew that nothing in his life had felt as right as helping her. "I don't know," he admitted. "But Earth isn't such a bad place once you get past all the humans, and who knows, maybe your people will come looking again someday." The Stargazer moved through space at a cautious pace. Jack had disabled the transponder as soon as they cleared the immediate vicinity of Station Epsilon. It was illegal, but necessary. No one could know they had been there, especially with the cargo. They now carried both the salvage technology and an undocumented alien passenger. Linda sat in the co-pilot's seat, her silver eyes wide as she took in the ship's controls. The vessel was small and utilitarian, with just enough room for Jack to live comfortably during his salvage runs. A far cry from the sprawling research station that had been her home for 3 decades, but she showed no signs of disappointment. "The first thing we need to do is change your appearance," Jack explained as he set the autopilot for a long route that would avoid the main shipping lanes and patrol routes. "Your coloring is too distinctive." Linda nodded, running her hands through her silver blue hair. "I can alter my appearance somewhat," she said. "My species has some control over pigmentation. It was part of why I was chosen as an envoy." She closed her eyes in concentration, and Jack watched in amazement as the luminescent markings on her skin slowly faded until they were barely visible. Her hair darkened to a more human shade of blonde, though it retained a subtle silvery sheen. Her skin lost its lavender hue, becoming a pale ivory. "That is remarkable." Jack breathed. Linda opened her eyes, which remained the same metallic silver. "It is limited," she explained. "I cannot maintain it indefinitely, and I cannot change my eyes." She seemed apologetic. Jack waved away her concern. "Well, get you some colored contact lenses at the first outpost. Some makeup for any remaining markings. You should be able to pass as a human with some genetic modifications. A lot of colonists have those these days, especially those from low-gravity environments. Their first stop would be Outpost 42, a trading hub on the edge of Federation space, known for its relaxed attitude toward regulations and documentation." It was 3 days' journey from their current position, giving them time to prepare Linda for her new identity. Jack spent those days teaching Linda about current human society. The station archives she had studied were 30 years out of date and focused primarily on scientific and historical data. She knew little of current politics, social norms, or pop culture, all things that might give her away as something other than human. Linda proved to be an incredibly quick study, absorbing information at a rate that amazed Jack. She had a particular fascination with music, requesting to hear every genre in his ship's limited library. Her favorite was classical, particularly the complex mathematical structures of Bach, which she said reminded her of Elorian harmony patterns. In return, Linda shared stories of her world, the cities of living crystal, the floating gardens that bloomed only in the light of the second moon, the great libraries where knowledge was stored not in books or computers, but in a kind of shared consciousness accessible to all Elorians. Her people sounded almost utopian to Jack, peaceful and harmonious without the strife that plagued human civilization. "If your people are so advanced, so peaceful, why bother with humans at all?" he asked as they shared a meal in the ship's tiny galley. "We must seem primitive in comparison." Linda considered this, her silver eyes thoughtful. "It is precisely your imperfection that makes humans interesting," she said. "My people achieved harmony thousands of years ago. Our society rarely changes. We have few conflicts. We create beautiful things, but there is little that is truly new. She smiled, a gesture she'd become more comfortable with. Your species creates, and destroys and rebuilds constantly. You feel everything so intensely. You argue and fight and love with your whole beings. Such passion is foreign to my people, but fascinating, like watching animals in a zoo. Jack said with a hint of bitterness. Linda's expression grew serious. No, she said firmly, like remembering what it was to be young, to feel everything, to still be becoming rather than simply being. She reached across the table, her hand hovering just above his, not quite touching. You mistake serenity for superiority. Jack Morgan, my people envy humans in some ways. Your capacity for change, your resilience, your unpredictability. These are strengths, not weaknesses. Jack wasn't entirely convinced, but he appreciated her perspective. It was strange to think of advanced aliens viewing humans with anything but disdain. Linda spoke of humanity with a kind of fond respect that he found oddly touching as they approached Outpost 42. Jack began coaching Linda on her new identity. She would be Amy, Carter, his cousin from the lunar colonies, coming to work with him after the mining accident that had killed her parents. They practiced her backstory repeatedly until she could recite it naturally. The contact lenses Jack had found in the ships. Medical supplies dulled the silver of her eyes to a more human pale gray. They wouldn't pass close inspection but should be sufficient for casual interactions. Her now blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and Jack had found her clothes that would blend in faded work pants and a standard-issue jacket with enough pockets to be practical. You look almost human, Jack said, as they prepared for docking Linda. Amy smiled. Is that a compliment? Jack felt his face warm. Definitely, Outpost 42 was a hodgepodge of connected modules and repurposed ships that had grown organically over decades. It served as a way station for traders, salvagers, and others who preferred to operate in the gray areas of Federation law. The central hub was a converted colony ship, its massive habitation cylinder now housing markets, cantinas, and temporary housing. Jack docked the Stargazer at an outer berth, paying extra for privacy and minimal documentation. He needed to find a buyer for the salvaged technology, preferably one who wouldn't ask too many questions about its origin. Stay close to me, he told Amy as they disembarked. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact. Let me do the talking. She nodded, adjusting the jacket he'd given her, which was slightly too large for her slender frame. The outfit, along with the subtle changes to her appearance, made her look like just another spacer. Perhaps a bit unusual, but nothing that would draw unwanted attention in a place where many species mingled. They made their way through the crowded docking area, Amy staying close behind Jack, her eyes wide behind the colored contacts as she took in the sights and sounds of the outpost. It was overwhelming after 30 years of isolation. The press of bodies, the cacophony of voices in multiple languages, the smells of food, cooking, engine grease, alien pheromones, and unwashed humans all mingling in the recycled air. Jack led them to a cantina called the Rusty Airlock, a dimly lit establishment frequented by salvagers and traders. He knew the owner, Valerie West, a former Federation pilot who had chosen a more independent life on the fringes. She might know potential buyers for their cargo. The cantina was half full despite the early hour. Jack nodded to a few familiar faces as he guided Amy to a booth in the back. Valerie spotted them immediately, her shrewd eyes taking in Amy with obvious curiosity. Jack Morgan, she called, striding over. Who is your pretty friend? Jack grinned. Val, this is my cousin, Amy Carter. She worked the mines on Luna, but needed a change of scenery after an accident. Amy, this is Val, owner of this fine establishment and the best pilot this side of Saturn, until she decided honest work was beneath her. Valerie laughed aloud, hearty sound. Honest work was never my problem, Morgan. It was the honest pay. She turned to Amy, extending a hand. Welcome to the Rusty Airlock, honey. Any family of this scoundrel gets their first drink on the house. Amy took the offered hand carefully, her grip gentle. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but clear. Your establishment is very interesting. Valerie raised an eyebrow. Interesting isn't usually the word people use, but I like your politeness. She winked at Jack. A bit refined for a lunar miner. Mining, Engineer Jack corrected smoothly. Amy has a gift for technology. That's so Valerie looked between them, her expression suggesting she didn't quite believe their story, but wasn't inclined to press the issue. Well, engineers are always in demand out here. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Word is you've been out to the Epsilon sector. Any truth to that? Jack kept his expression neutral. Just a standard salvage run. Nothing special. Valerie snorted. Sure, and the Federation president. She straightened, adjusting her apron. Usual drinks? Jack nodded and Valerie moved off to the bar. Amy leaned forward, her voice barely audible. She knows something is not right. Jack sighed. Val's been running this place for 20 years. Nothing gets by her, but she minds. Her own business as long as you do the same. He glanced around the cantina. Most people here operate in gray areas of the law. It's safer not to ask too many questions. Their drinks arrived, a synthahol for Jack and a fruit juice for Amy. Jack raised, his glass in a small toast. To new beginnings, Amy mimicked the gesture, sipping carefully at the unfamiliar drink. I have never tasted this before, she said, her eyes widening. It's sweet. It was such a simple observation, but it struck Jack how many ordinary experiences were new to her. How many things humans took for granted that she was experiencing for the first time. It made him see his familiar world through fresh eyes as they finished their drinks. Jack spotted a familiar face at the bar. Sierra, Kelly, a technology broker known for finding buyers for unusual merchandise. He excused himself from Amy, promising to return quickly. Sierra, I need your expertise, he said, sliding onto the stool beside her. The broker eyed him warily, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. What kind of expertise, Morgan? Last time you brought me salvage, it was still dripping with coolant and had Federation property stamps all over it. Jack secured them a small room in one of the outpost's residential modules. It was basic but clean, with 2 narrow beds, a tiny bathroom, and a food preparation area barely big enough to turn around in. But it offered privacy, and the landlord didn't ask questions beyond whether the credit transfer cleared. Amy stood by the single small window looking out at the sprawl of the outpost. The station's exterior was lit with thousands of light ships coming and going in carefully choreographed patterns. Her expression was difficult to read, but Jack thought he detected a mixture of wonder and apprehension. It's not much, he said apologetically, dumping their bags on one of the beds. But it's secure, and the location is good. Close to the markets and docking bays, but not so central that will draw attention. It's perfect. Amy turned to him, her silver eyes catching the light behind the colored contacts. I have had a large, empty station to myself for 30 years. This is cozy. She smiled, the expression becoming more natural with practice. I like being around life again, even if I must hide who I am. Jack felt relief, though he wasn't sure why her approval mattered to him. Get some rest, he suggested. Tomorrow we'll be busy. We meet Sierra's buyer in the morning. Then we need to finish setting up your identity. Before we leave the outpost, we'll need documentation that will pass inspection. Amy nodded and began preparing for sleep with methodical efficiency. Jack had provided her with basic toiletries and clothing, acquired during their stop at an outpost shop. She treated each item with careful attention as if it were precious. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, reminding Jack that despite her human appearance, she was fundamentally different from him. Her mind worked differently. Her culture and experiences were alien in the most literal sense. Yet as she wished him good night, her voice soft in the dimly lit room, Jack felt a connection to her that transcended those differences. They were both outsiders in their own way, both searching for something, neither fully at home in the worlds they inhabited. The next morning, Jack left Amy in their room with instructions to stay put and avoid contact with others. He met Sierra at a quiet corner of the trading floor. The broker was accompanied by a tall, elegant woman with silver implants at her temples and wrists. Her clothes were expensive but understated, marking her as someone with wealth who preferred not to advertise it. Sierra made Introductions. Eleanor Patel. This is Jack Morgan. Eleanor owns a private research facility in the outer colonies. She has interest in unique technology. The woman inclined her head slightly, her gaze calculating as it swept over Jack. I understand you have acquired items of interest. Mr. Morgan. Jack nodded carefully. Items from an abandoned research station. Experimental technology. Some of it quite advanced. Where exactly was this station? Eleanor asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. Jack maintained a neutral expression. Federation classified. I'm afraid the salvage contract prevents me from disclosing specifics. But the tech speaks for itself. Eleanor smiled thinly. I see. And you have legitimate salvage rights, I presume. Of course. Jack produced the documentation on his datapad, carefully edited to remove references to Station Epsilon. All properly filed and approved. The woman studied the documents before handing the datapad back to Jack. Very well. Let us see what you've brought. Jack led them to a secure storage unit he'd rented upon arrival. The cases of salvage technology were arranged neatly, each labeled with basic descriptions that revealed nothing of their true origin or capabilities. He opened the first case, revealing the quantum entanglement module. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, her composure slipping for just a moment. This is not standard Federation technology, she said, her voice carefully controlled. It's not, Jack. Confirmed. This and several other pieces appear to be experimental prototypes. Possibly abandoned when the research was deemed impractical or when funding was cut. He was careful to maintain the fiction that these were simply unusual human designs, rather than reverse-engineered alien technology. Eleanor examined each piece with growing interest, asking technical questions that Jack answered as best he could, based on what Amy had told him. When they reached the final case containing energy cells with extraordinary capacity, the woman had made up her mind. I am prepared to make an offer. She said I would like to acquire the entire collection. The sum she named was staggering, more than enough to clear Jack's debts and keep him operating independently for years. But something about Eleanor made him uneasy. The way she studied the technology was too intense, too knowing. As if she recognized its true origin. I'll need to consider your offer, Jack said carefully. It's generous. But I have other interested parties. Eleanor's expression hardened. I doubt anyone else would offer as much or ask as few questions. She removed a small card from her pocket, handing it to Jack. My facility is always looking for individuals with your skills. Mr. Morgan. Perhaps we could discuss a more permanent arrangement. Jack took the card non-committally. Thank you. He'll be in touch by tomorrow. After Eleanor and Sierra departed, Jack secured the storage unit and made his way back to their temporary quarters. His mind racing. He needed the money. The offer was beyond generous. But something felt wrong. Eleanor had seemed too interested, too knowledgeable, and the mention of a permanent arrangement felt more like a trap than an opportunity. When he entered their room, he found Amy sitting cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed. She appeared to be meditating, but as the door closed behind him, she opened her eyes immediately. You are troubled, she said. It was not a question. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. The buyer is offering an incredible amount. But he hesitated, unsure how to explain his misgivings. She knows, Amy said softly. She recognizes the technology. Jack stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Amy rose gracefully to her feet, the markings on her neck faintly visible through the makeup she wore. I can sense it. Your posture, your breathing patterns, your micro-expressions all indicate concern beyond normal negotiation anxiety. She tilted her head, studying him, and it is the logical conclusion. The technology is clearly not of human origin. Anyone with sufficient knowledge would recognize this. Jack dropped onto one of the beds, the implications sinking in. If Eleanor recognized the alien origin of the technology, she might also suspect Amy's existence. She might even be looking for her. We need to leave, Jack decided abruptly. Find another buyer somewhere further from Federation space. Amy sat beside him, her movements fluid. Her hand hovered near his for a moment before gently touching his wrist. You would forfeit such payment because of risk to me, Jack looked at her, the silver of her eyes barely visible behind the colored contacts. Money isn't worth the risk, he finished lamely, though they both knew he meant something else. Amy smiled faintly. I have another suggestion, she said. Accept her offer, but only for select pieces. The communications technology and basic energy cells. Keep the quantum entanglement module and the more advanced items. These are the pieces that most clearly indicate non-human origin. Jack considered this. It could work. Selling part of the salvage would give them operating funds while keeping the most dangerous pieces out of Eleanor's hands. But what about you? He asked. What if she is looking for more than just technology? What if she somehow knows? About you, Amy's expression grew serious. You have already risked much to help me. I cannot ask you to forfeit this opportunity. The money would secure your future. Allow you to clear your debts. Jack shook his head. Those debts have been hanging over me for years. A few more months won't matter. His voice grew firm. We're partners now. Decisions affect us both. The word partners seemed to surprise Amy, her markings pulsing briefly visible beneath the makeup. Is that what we are? She asked, her voice careful. Jack had planned to use that word but found he meant it. Yeah, I guess we are. At least until we figure out something more permanent for you, Amy. Nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. I like this partnership, she decided. Then I agree with your assessment. We should leave, find another buyer elsewhere. Perhaps one of the independent colonies beyond Federation jurisdiction. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jack contacted Sierra, claiming he'd received a competing offer and would need to postpone his decision. He could tell the broker was suspicious, but she couldn't force the issue. While Amy packed their few belongings, Jack arranged for their departure, securing a flight path that would take them toward the Perseus Arm, where several independent colonies operated beyond Federation control. As night fell over the outpost, they made final preparations. Jack transferred funds to various accounts, ensuring they would have resources available without creating an easily tracked financial footprint. Amy maintained her human disguise, though Jack could tell the effort of suppressing her natural luminescence was taking a toll. They were scheduled to depart at dawn, slipping out during shift change when station security would be at its minimum. It wasn't an ideal plan, but it was the best they could manage on short notice. Jack was checking their supplies one final time when the room's communication panel chimed. Assuming it was an automated message from station control, he accepted the transmission without checking the sender. Eleanor Patel's face appeared on the small screen, her expression pleasant, but her eyes cold. Mr. Morgan, I was disappointed to hear you're considering other offers. She said, I thought we'd established a rapport. Jack kept his expression neutral. Ms. Patel, business is business. I have to consider all options. They moved quickly, gathering only what they could carry in a single bag each. Jack had learned long ago to travel light, a habit that served them well now. Amy followed his lead, her movements precise and efficient, despite her obvious fear. Instead of heading toward the docking bay where the Stargazer waited, Jack led them in the opposite direction through service corridors rarely used by the station's regular inhabitants. Where are we going? Amy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The ship is the other way. Jack nodded grimly. Exactly. They'll be watching the Stargazer. We need another way out. They navigated through maintenance tunnels, Jack occasionally consulting a small handheld device that displayed the station's layout. His years as a salvager had taught him to always know the back exits, the unofficial routes that didn't appear on official maps. The spaces between that authorities often overlooked. After 20 minutes of tense movement, they reached a small auxiliary docking area used primarily for maintenance vessels and supply drops. A handful of ships were moored there, most of them utilitarian craft designed for function rather than comfort. Jack approached a small transport ship, its hull scarred from years of use. The name Horizon was painted on the side in faded letters. This one, Jack said, pulling out a small electronic device from his pocket. Amy looked between him and the ship in confusion. This is not your vessel. Jack grinned wryly. No, but it's about to be. He attached the device to the ship's access panel. It only took a few seconds before the airlock slid open. We're stealing it, Amy said, her voice flat. Borrowing, Jack corrected. Already moving inside, I know the owner, Valerie. She keeps it as a backup. He didn't mention that his relationship with Val was complicated enough that she might not see the distinction between borrowing and stealing. The ship's interior was cramped but functional. Jack moved to the cockpit, immediately beginning the startup. Sequence. Amy closed and secured the airlock behind them, her movements betraying her anxiety. "I have never stolen before," she said, taking the co-pilot's seat. Jack glanced at her as his fingers flew over the controls. "There's a first time for everything," he said lightly, though his expression remained tense. "If it helps Val's insured, and I left her an anonymous credit transfer for more than the ship's worth." The engines hummed to life. Jack keeping them at minimal power to avoid drawing attention, he bypassed the standard departure protocol, sending a falsified maintenance request to station control instead of a flight plan. It would buy them a few minutes at most, but that might be enough as the docking clamps released. Jack eased the ship away from the station using minimal thrusters. The less attention they drew, the better. Once they were clear of the immediate docking area, he plotted a course that would take them behind the station's primary communication array, using it as cover from both sensors and visual observation. Their luck held for nearly 10 minutes. Then the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Unidentified vessel. This is Outpost 42 security. You are departing without proper clearance. Return to your dock immediately." Jack ignored the command, continuing their careful trajectory away from the station. They were almost to the point where they could engage the main engines and make a run for it. Amy watched the sensor display, her expression grim. 2 vessels approaching. From the primary docking area, she reported. "They are moving to intercept." Jack nodded grimly. He had expected as much. Eleanor Patel had resources and connections. Station security might not know exactly why they were pursuing this ship, but they had clearly been instructed to stop it. "We need 3 more minutes," Jack said, his voice tight. "Just 3 minutes until we're clear enough to jump." The security vessels were closing fast, warning messages continuing to blare from the communication system. Jack shut it off, focusing instead on the ship's controls. The Horizon might be old, but it had been well maintained. Its engines were tuned for speed rather than power, which suited their needs perfectly. Suddenly, the ship rocked as energy fire grazed their port side. Jack swore under his breath. They were shooting already, no warning shots, no attempt to disable. The security vessels were trying to destroy them. "They know what you are," Jack said grimly. "They're not taking chances." Amy's silver eyes widened behind her colored contacts. "They will kill us both," she whispered. "Not if I can help it." Jack banked the ship hard, evading another burst of energy fire. The Horizon responded beautifully to his commands, more nimble than its aged exterior suggested. Amy gripped her seat, watching the sensor displays with intensity. "They are hurting us," she observed suddenly. "The firing pattern is designed to push us toward the asteroid field at the edge of the station's defensive perimeter." She pointed to a section of the display where a cloud of small objects floated. Jack saw it immediately. She was right. The security vessels weren't trying to hit them directly. They were forcing them into a path where the ship's engines would be less effective, where they would have to slow down or risk collision. "I can't outrun them in the asteroids," Jack said, his mind racing. Amy was quiet for a moment, her markings faintly visible through her makeup as they pulsed with increased thought activity. "You don't need to outrun them," she said finally. "You need to hide." Before Jack could ask what she meant, Amy had unbuckled from her seat, moving to the central area of the small ship. She knelt on the floor, placing her palms flat against the metal deck. Her eyes closed in concentration. "What are you doing?" Jack called over his shoulder, still focused on evading the increasingly accurate weapons fire. "Creating a distraction." Amy replied, her voice strained. The luminescent markings on her skin were now fully visible, glowing with an intensity Jack had never seen before. They pulsed in complex patterns that seemed to flow from her hands into the ship's hull. The sensors began to malfunction, readings flickering and jumping erratically. Jack was about to complain when he realized what was happening. Amy wasn't breaking the sensors, she was manipulating them, changing what they detected. On the security vessel scanners, it would appear as if the Horizon had suddenly split into multiple identical signatures, all moving in different directions. It was an illusion, but a convincing one. The security ships hesitated, their fire becoming scattered as they tried to determine which signal was the real vessel. Jack seized the opportunity, pushing the engines to full power and charting a course directly away from the asteroid field. Within moments, they had cleared the station's defensive perimeter. Now Jack engaged the faster-than-light drive, the stars stretching into lines around them as the horizon leapt into hyperspace. The security vessels, left far behind. Jack set the autopilot for a course that would take them toward the Perseus arm with several navigational jumps to throw off any pursuit. Then he turned to Amy, who remained kneeling on the floor, her hands still pressed against the hull. Her skin was pale, her markings dim, her breathing labored. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, moving quickly to her side. Amy nodded, though the effort was clearly visible. "I'm fine," she said, her voice weak. "Just tired. It has been a long time since I channeled energy that way." Jack helped her to a seat. "What did you do exactly?" Amy smiled faintly. "I manipulated the electromagnetic field around the ship, created false readings." She gestured vaguely. "It is an ability my people have, though usually not for such purposes. We use it for communication art, sometimes for navigation." Jack stared at her in amazement. "You never mentioned you could do that." "There are many things I have not told you," Amy replied, her smile growing slightly. "It seemed prudent to keep some abilities private until I was certain of your intentions." She closed her eyes briefly. "Even among my people, such talents are rare. I was selected as an envoy partly because of them." As her strength returned, Amy explained more about her people's abilities, their connection to electromagnetic energy, their capacity to perceive and manipulate it in ways humans could not comprehend. Their physical forms were partly energy-based, allowing for certain adaptations that purely biological beings could not achieve. Jack listened, fascinated. "This explains why the Federation was so interested in you. The military applications alone." Amy nodded, her expression growing serious. "They wanted to understand how we connect with energy fields, how we communicate across vast distances, how we can influence technology with thought. They believed it could revolutionize their weapon systems, their communication networks." She looked down at her hands, the markings now barely glowing. "They did not understand that these abilities cannot be separated from what we are. They cannot be replicated in humans or machines." They sat in silence for a while, both processing the events of their narrow escape. Finally, Jack checked their course. They were headed toward a small independent colony called Haven, a place known for asking few questions and valuing privacy. The journey would take several days, even at maximum speed, giving them time to plan their next move. "I have been thinking," Jack said, as they shared a meal from the ship's limited supplies. "Eleanor knew about Station Epsilon, about the first contact. That information was classified, buried. There's no way a private researcher should have access to it." Amy considered this, her silver eyes reflecting the soft cabin lights. "Who authorized the original research?" she asked. "Who was in command of the project before Karen intervened?" Jack frowned, trying to remember the station logs he'd downloaded. A scientist named Dr. William Patel. He was the head of the research team, the one who argued with Karen in the video footage. Patel. Amy repeated the same name as Eleanor. Jack Morgan stood at the controls of his salvage ship, the Stargazer, watching as the coordinates for Station Epsilon appeared on his navigation screen. The abandoned research facility floated silently against the backdrop of stars, its once proud Federation emblem now faded and scarred by 3 decades of space debris. Jack ran his hand through his short brown hair and sighed. He needed this job to work out. His debts were piling up, and the Federation paid top dollar for recovery of classified tech from abandoned stations, especially ones with mysterious pasts. The Stargazer shuddered as it docked with the airlock. Jack double-checked his environment suit and weapons before stepping into the decontamination chamber. His pulse rifle felt heavy in his hands, a necessary precaution. The official reports claimed Station Epsilon had been evacuated due to a containment breach. But rumors among salvage crews suggested something else entirely. Strange signal patterns, unusual energy readings, Missing crew members whose records had been mysteriously erased. Jack didn't believe in ghost stories, but he believed in being prepared. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor bathed in the dim red glow of emergency lighting. The station was eerily silent except for the occasional creak of metal as the structure shifted. Jack activated his helmet lights and moved forward, his magnetic boots clanking against the floor. His suit sensors indicated thin but breathable air. So, after a moment of hesitation, he removed his helmet and took a cautious breath. The air tasted stale and metallic, but not dangerous. Most of the main corridors were intact, though signs of a hasty evacuation were everywhere. Personal items scattered across the floor, half-eaten meals still sitting in the mess hall. Datapads abandoned mid-report. Jack collected what seemed valuable, moving methodically through the station. According to the salvage plan he had memorized, it was in the East Wing research sector that things changed. The corridors here bore scorch marks from what looked like energy weapons. Jack frowned. This didn't match any containment breach scenario he knew. He moved more cautiously now. His rifle raised as he approached the main laboratory. The doors were sealed with a high-security lockdown that shouldn't have been active after all this time. Jack pulled out his bypass kit and began working on the security panel. It took nearly an hour, but finally the door slid open with a grinding. Protest Jack stepped inside and froze. His flashlight beam had caught movement, a shadow shifting behind one of the large containment tanks. His heart hammered in his chest as he raised his rifle step out slowly. He called, his voice echoing through the empty chamber, "I won't hurt you if you don't hurt me." After a moment of tense silence, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman tall with delicate features and long hair that seemed to shimmer between silver and pale blue in the dim light. Her skin had a subtle lavender hue, and her eyes were large and entirely silver without pupils. But most striking was the intricate pattern of luminescent markings that traced across her bare arms and up her neck, pulsing softly with each breath. She wore what appeared to be a modified station jumpsuit with the name tag Linda stitched across the chest. Though her appearance was clearly not human, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her. Jack lowered his weapon slightly. "You speak English?" The woman tilted her head, studying him with those strange metallic eyes. "I learned from the station archives and crew recordings," she said, her voice melodic with an unusual resonance. "My name is Linda now. It is easier for humans to pronounce." "You survived. Here all this time alone?" Jack asked, incredulous. "I am the reason the station was abandoned." Linda replied. She moved with unusual grace, almost floating across the floor toward one of the laboratory consoles. "I was not a prisoner, but a guest, though. Not everyone understood that." She gestured to the console, which flickered to life at her touch. "I can show you." Jack approached cautiously, still keeping his rifle ready. Video footage appeared on the screen showing the laboratory 30 years earlier, filled with researchers in Federation uniforms. A younger version of Linda sat on an examination table surrounded by curious scientists. One woman with commander stripes and short blonde hair stood protectively close to Linda, while a man in a science division uniform argued heatedly with her. "They wanted to dissect me," Linda explained, her voice flat. "They believed my biology would advance their understanding by decades." Commander Karen Matthews disagreed. She believed in diplomatic relations first, that I was an ambassador, not a specimen. The video showed the argument escalating, the male scientist calling for security, while Commander Matthews quickly led Linda away from the group. The footage jumped to another camera, showing them running through corridors, alarms blaring. "Red Karen helped me escape capture," Linda continued. "She sealed me in a stasis chamber and initiated evacuation protocols claiming a containment breach. She gave her career to protect me." The video ended with Commander Matthews typing frantically at a console before security personnel burst in. The feed cut out. Jack stared at the blank screen, processing what he had just seen. "And you've been here since then." "In stasis, I awoke periodically when the emergency systems detected potential rescue," Linda explained. "But most ships that approached were Federation military I could not risk capture. So I returned to stasis until the emergency systems detected your salvage vessel. My people will have given up searching for me by..." Now she turned those silver eyes to him, searching his face. "You are not military. You are here to salvage." Jack nodded slowly. The classified tech in this place would be worth a fortune. But you know that a living alien specimen would be worth much more to the right people. Linda smiled sadly. I know humans well enough now to understand my value. The tests they would run on me would not be pleasant, but I would survive. They always need living specimens. Jack frowned, studying her. Are you offering yourself up? I have been alone for 30 years, Linda said softly. I have read every book in the station, archives, watched every entertainment file, listened to every music recording. I long for connection, even if it comes with pain. Is that not understandable? Something about her words stirred an unexpected feeling in Jack. Had been a salvager for 15 years, taking what he could sell, doing whatever jobs kept his ship flying and creditors at bay. Had never given much thought to the bigger picture of his actions, but standing here facing this being who spoke so eloquently of loneliness, he felt something shift inside him. Show me what needs salvaging, he said finally. I have a job to complete. Linda nodded, and for the next several hours, she guided him through the station, showing him where the most valuable technology was stored, helping him access secured areas that would have taken days to bypass on his own. She explained the function of various devices, much of which seemed far more advanced than standard Federation tech of that era as they worked. She told him fragments of her story. She had come to the station willingly, a diplomatic envoy from a civilization in the Andromeda galaxy. Her people, the Elorians, had been watching humanity for centuries, choosing their moment to make first contact. They believed humans had potential, Linda explained as she helped Jack disassemble a quantum computer core. But they feared humanity's tendency toward violence and exploitation. They sound wise, Jack muttered. Linda smiled at that, the markings on her neck glowing brighter momentarily. They are not perfect either, just older. Your species is young, still learning. By the end of the first day, Jack had salvaged enough to fulfill his basic contract, but Linda had shown him hidden laboratories with technology that would be worth 10 times what the Federation was offering if sold to the right private buyers. You know all this tech, but you stayed here, Jack said as they sat in what had been the station's mess hall, sharing a meal of reconstituted ration packs. You could have escaped, built something. I was programmed not to interfere with human development, Linda replied. Then, seeing his expression, she clarified. Not programmed as a machine. We have biological, safeguards, cultural imperatives. My mission was observation and controlled contact, not interference. Jack nodded, though he didn't fully understand. There was so much about her that remained mysterious. Her silvery eyes watched him with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and curious. The luminescent patterns on her skin shifted subtly with her moods he was beginning to recognize. Fascination, caution, sadness. As the station's lighting dimmed to simulate night cycle, Jack set up a temporary camp. In what had been the crew quarters, Linda retired to her own space, a room she'd adapted over the years filled with items she'd collected from throughout the station. Books, artwork, personal effects left behind by the crew. Jack lay awake for a long time thinking about what he would do when it came time to leave. The Federation would indeed pay a fortune for an alien, especially one who looked so human, yet so exotic. A living specimen from an advanced civilization, yet the thought of turning her over to be studied, dissected, perhaps made his stomach turn. Linda seemed resigned to that fate, but Jack found himself increasingly troubled by it. When sleep finally came, his dreams were filled with silver eyes and stars from a galaxy he would never see.